I was happy when, while still in school, I found out that the meanest and most unpleasant teacher, who was also our homeroom teacher, had quit. He made my life miserable, always walked around with an unfriendly face, allowed himself to insult students, and gave low grades. He taught math. I was already not good at it, but his anger made it even harder for me to answer well at the board because I was so nervous. Every morning before school, I would have a stomachache from stress. I hated and feared this teacher so much. I was curious who would replace him. In my dreams, I imagined a kind teacher who could explain the material in an interesting and clear way, so that going to school wouldn't be scary. But what if the new teacher would be even worse? I didn't want to think about that. At dinner with my family, I thought about it and decided that I would review the material over the weekend to shine with knowledge in front of the new teacher so he would like me. I would show him my best side right away and win his sympathy and trust. After dinner, I went to study math. Honestly, nothing was working out. The clock on the wall was ticking, and I kept sitting at my desk trying to get through a paragraph. I only managed to solve one problem and, exhausted, went to sleep. In the morning on the way to school, anxious thoughts filled my mind. What if this teacher is much worse than the old one? What if he calls me to the board first? My gut feeling never let me down. At school, I met my best friends, Olivia and Victoria. As we walked down the corridor, we discussed what the new teacher would be like. As we approached the classroom, we started to feel fear. When we all sat down, our new teacher entered the class. He introduced himself as Mr. William. He was an elderly man in a business suit with a very kind and pleasant face. He seemed very nice and friendly, wished us a good morning, and then smiled. Then he suggested we review our knowledge of the previous topic and said he would start from the end of the list. I hate it when they do that because my last name is Young. Damn, I knew my gut feeling wouldn't let me down. I just knew I'd be called first. He invited me to the board. Out of habit, I broke into a sweat and my hands started shaking. The phrase from my old teacher echoed in my mind. "You're a failure. You only embarrass yourself when you answer at the board." But the new teacher smiled and picked exactly the problem that I had solved last night before bed. I easily solved the problem, the teacher praised me, and I got a top mark. I was over the moon with happiness and enthusiastically returned to my seat. By the end of the lesson, all my classmates were thrilled with the teacher. No one got a bad grade, and everyone understood the new topic. The mood was great. The entire school day flew by so quickly that it seemed like I had just arrived at school, and it was already time to go home. At home, I was so happy that I even started dancing. Could it be that a white streak had begun, and I would be able to enjoy every day? Could it be that school could bring positive emotions? But the next morning, I woke up in a cold sweat. I had dreamt of our new teacher, Mr. William. In the dream, he appeared evil. I was lying down, and then he entered the room and started strangling me with all his might. What a nightmare to have. All the following week at school, I got good grades. The teacher adored me and constantly smiled. The funny old man gave me problems that I easily solved, but I had a dissonance. Every day, starting from the first day I met him, I was tormented by nightmares at night, and in each dream our teacher strangled me with hatred. It was unbearable. I wasn't getting any sleep. Another strange thing was that the smartest girl in the class started getting failing grades. At the end of the week, on Friday, the teacher asked her to stay after class for some reason. All weekend I was still tormented by nightmares. Mostly he strangled me, but a couple of times he chased me with a knife. On Monday, I approached the class's top student and asked what he had talked to her about after class. She monotonously replied, "I don't remember." Her eyes seemed empty. I could tell something was wrong with her, but she didn't want to talk. To my surprise, she started getting top marks again, but something was still off with her. It felt like she had become lifeless. By the end of the week, I noticed that now Olivia was getting bad grades. Then the teacher asked her to stay as well. I decided to wait. After she came out of the classroom, it seemed to me that something had happened to her too. But she didn't want to talk, didn't answer questions, and we walked home in silence. After that, her grades improved, but she looked empty and lifeless. Eventually, Olivia stopped talking to us. After a couple of months, half the class had changed. Fortunately, my friend Victoria understood me. She also found all of this strange. I asked her if she was having nightmares and told her about my own terrifying dreams that were making my life miserable. My friend sympathized and said she didn't have any nightmares. We started to suspect the new teacher. Everyone who stayed with him after class became empty, like dolls. Victoria and I agreed to keep an eye on each other. If the teacher asked one of us to stay, the other would try to prevent it. A couple of weeks later, our grades dropped, and the teacher asked us, like everyone else, to stay after class. We were terrified. We began to make excuses and invent reasons why we couldn't stay. He was very surprised, as other students immediately agreed. He noticed our panic and started reassuring us. "Don't be afraid of me, I won't eat you. You won't believe it, but I have magical abilities. I see that you're struggling with your studies. To help you trust me, I'm giving you these 2 lucky charms. Make sure to keep them with you, and your grades will improve, your mood will lift, and if you're not sleeping well, your sleep will be as deep and healthy as a baby's," he said, and smiled at us. We thanked the teacher and left the classroom. Outside, I told Victoria that I had a strange feeling, but we didn't leave the room with empty eyes like our classmates, so I wasn't too worried. I didn't know what he did to them, what he told them, but it didn't work on us. At home, lying in bed, I examined the charm. What surprised me was that it was made of gold. It was clear that it was an expensive item. I suddenly felt very sleepy. It was the first night in 2 months when I didn't dream of the teacher strangling me, and I finally slept soundly and fully. When I met Victoria at school, she was also glowing with joy. I didn't even have time to ask her before she immediately said that with the charm, her mood was excellent, and she had interesting dreams. That day, we got top marks in all subjects. What a miracle this charm is. On Tuesday, Victoria ran up to me in tears. She said she had lost her lucky charm. I suggested we go together and explain the situation to the teacher, but she said she was too embarrassed and would go alone after class. Victoria went to the teacher, and I had to get home early. The next day, Wednesday, I approached her, but she was unrecognizable. She had become like most of the kids in the class, empty and uncommunicative. I was very upset. I had no friends left, and I even started missing the times with the mean teacher. At least I had friends back then. The only thing that made me happy was that, thanks to the charm, I stopped having nightmares, and my studies were going well. The following week, the teacher called me after class and said he needed a little help. The next week, they were planning a school trip to another city, and all the students were supposed to go. Everyone except me had already signed the form. I said I would ask my parents. The teacher smiled and told me not to worry, that he would talk to my parents himself, and that they would definitely let me go. I agreed. He was very pleased, gave me the form, and asked me to sign it too. My parents are lawyers and always taught me to read any documents I sign, no matter who gives them to me. I told him I needed to read it. He smiled again. I started reading. The first few pages were about safety rules and behavior norms, but among all the pages in small print, I read, "Invitation to the best trip of your life. On the road there will be the tastiest ice cream, various chips, and 3 types of soda. The trip guarantees unforgettable views, a park with rides, and a charm that will give you endless luck in your studies. For that, you could even sell your soul." And then there was a signature line. I didn't like the last phrase about selling your soul. I saw what had happened to my friends, but it was scary to refuse the teacher. I started feeling a great danger from him. I decided not to refuse and said I needed to think about it for a day. For the first time, he looked at me angrily, as if I was the first one not to fulfill his request. Apparently, that was the case. The other kids clearly didn't understand the documents and weren't as trained in this as I was. The teacher didn't like it. He agreed with me and asked not to delay with the answer, or I would regret not visiting such interesting places. On my way home, I started thinking about the teacher's proposal. It was all insanely strange. That's not how contracts are written. Maybe he's not even human. That night, I slept soundly and sweetly again with the charm. In the morning, I woke up to find that my dog had stolen it from me and was chewing on it. "Pluto, no!" I shouted and barely managed to take it back. My dog, Pluto, growled at that moment. He had badly damaged it, and I was upset. What if the nightmares came back? That day, the teacher called me after class and asked for the documents. I dared to say that it was written incorrectly and that I wouldn't sign something like that. I could see that it rattled him. He turned red and pale but tried not to show it, forcing a smile. He asked me to give him the charm he had given me. Then he turned away, did something to it, and handed it back with a sly smile. Returning home, I entered the building and called the elevator. When it arrived, I pressed the button for the 15th floor. The elevator started going up when suddenly the light went out. I was terrified. Then someone or something started strangling me. I couldn't see it or touch it. I only felt that I was suffocating and being squeezed, just like in my nightmares. I could barely stay on my feet when I suddenly pulled the charm out of my pocket, threw it on the floor, and tried to step on it. I tried with all my might to crush it when suddenly I heard a crack, and at that moment, the light in the elevator came back on. It continued to go up, and I was released. When the elevator reached my floor, I rushed home. My parents were home. I pretended to be sick, and they called a doctor. Due to the stress, I actually had a fever, and I was given a week off school. It seems my dreams were prophetic. I don't know what he is, but he's definitely either a demon or the devil. Without that stupid charm, my nightmares returned. On the day of the trip, while my parents were at work, I caught Victoria on her way to school and didn't let her go to that teacher. She was still not herself. She seemed empty and brainwashed. I had to use force to pull her back home. I stayed with her until it was time for the school bus to leave. That evening, when I got home, my mom and I were watching TV. The news reported that our school bus had crashed. We were horrified and burst into tears. That night, I had another dream. Our school bus was driving across a bridge, and Mr. Williams suddenly turned the wheel sharply to the right, towards the river. As the bus fell, just before hitting the water, I heard the teacher's voice. "We miss you." I woke up in a cold sweat. After that, the teacher stopped appearing in my dreams. I'm sure I encountered a real demon who destroyed our class. I had sensed something was wrong. My mom always told me I had good intuition, and my strangling dreams turned out to be prophetic. My friend Vera is still not herself, and no one knows how to help her.